Centralia. On the surface, it was little more than a dot on Pennsylvania's old coal map. A small mining town wrapped in gentle hills, dense forests, and the hum of distant trains. If you were driving by in the early 1960s, you might have slowed only to admire the neat rows of houses, white picket fences, and the proud steeple of St. Ignatius Church. Children played baseball in dusty lots. Old men gathered on porches, swapping stories of their youth underground, and coal trucks rumbled steadily along narrow streets. It was the kind of place that seemed frozen in time. Simple, content, untouched by the chaos of cities beyond. But beneath this picturesque surface lay something ancient and hungry. It all started, so they say, on a careless afternoon in May of 1962. A small fire was set to burn trash in an abandoned strip mine. Routine, unremarkable, something the town had done countless times before. Yet this time, the flames found an opening to the underworld, a maze of forgotten mining tunnels stretching for miles beneath Centralia. Like breath catching on dry tinder, the fire leapt down into the darkness, eager to consume. At first, nobody paid it much attention. Coal seams often smoldered. It was part of life in mining country. Weeks passed, then months, and still the ground stayed warm in odd patches. People joked about it, slapped each other on the back, blamed faulty pipes or unusually hot summers. But the jokes died when the streets began to crack. Long, sinister fissures that snaked through asphalt like veins of rot. Wisps of gray smoke curled lazily from the earth, carrying a sulfur stench that burned the throat. Sometimes at night, you could see faint orange glows pulsing beneath broken roads, like the heartbeat of some buried beast. By the late 1960s, the town knew something was deeply wrong. Reports came in of carbon monoxide leaking into basements. Children fell sick without explanation. One local miner, returning home after a late shift, collapsed on his porch, dead before his head hit the floor. Doctors blamed a silent, invisible killer rising from below. Still, most stayed. Centralia was their home. Their fathers had mined there. Their mothers had prayed in those churches. Leaving felt like tearing out a part of themselves. In the early 1970s, the government stepped in. Experts with clipboards and serious eyes arrived, measuring air quality, sinking probes deep into the soil. They tried everything, pouring wet sand into burning shafts, digging enormous trenches to cut off fuel. Nothing worked. The fire was always one step ahead, slipping through unseen veins of coal, laughing in its dark, crackling way. Stories started to swirl then, too. Stories that had little to do with science. A group of teenagers out drinking claimed they saw figures moving inside the steam. An elderly woman swore she heard her dead husband calling from an open vent near her yard. One local priest quietly told parishioners he believed something far older than fire had been awakened. People began locking their doors tight at night, as if it could keep out whatever watched from beneath. By the 1980s, the U.S. government had enough. They offered buyouts, pleaded with families to relocate. House after house stood empty, windows dark, doors left ajar to the elements. Nature began reclaiming the streets. Grass and weeds burst through broken sidewalks. Trees leaned drunkenly over abandoned cars. Paint peeled from quiet homes like dead skin. And still, thin threads of smoke wound their way into the sky. A boy named Todd Domboski almost didn't live to tell his own ghost story. In 1981, he was walking across his backyard when the ground simply opened beneath him, a sudden maw belching hot, toxic air. He managed to grab a tree root, clinging for dear life until his cousin pulled him free. When they looked down, they saw nothing but swirling darkness. The hole was gone within days, as if it had never existed. Meanwhile, legends grew darker. People whispered that government officials knew more than they admitted. That hidden military tunnels beneath Centralia were being used for experiments, chemical, biological, or worse. Conspiracy theorists insisted the fire was started on purpose, to cover up evidence buried in old mine shafts. Paranormal investigators from across the country came with cameras and EMF meters, hoping to catch the spirits of miners still trapped in underground galleries. Even today, decades later, if you stand on what remains of Route 61, a road famously warped and cracked by subterranean heat, you'll see graffiti scrawled by ghost hunters and thrill seekers. Bright neon warnings sit next to crude devils, crosses, desperate love confessions. If you're patient, you might spot faint tendrils of steam still rising from the earth, especially in winter when cold air meets hidden warmth. Locals who refuse to leave, no more than a stubborn handful now, live quiet, stubborn lives. They sweep front porches, plant vegetable gardens, wave to rare passers-by. At night, they lock up tight, pull heavy curtains, and pretend not to hear muffled hisses that drift up through the floorboards. Ask them why they stay, and you'll get a shrug, maybe a sad smile. This is home, they say, even if home is burning from the inside out. And if you linger long enough, you might start to feel it too. The heavy air pressing against your lungs, the uneasy sensation of being watched from beneath, the subtle tremor of earth that has nothing to do with distant trucks or wind in the trees. Stand there by yourself under a moonless sky. Watch fog roll low across ruined streets, and see if your courage doesn't falter. Imagine hands reaching up from cracks in the pavement, beckoning you closer. Imagine voices whispering just out of earshot, voices that know your name. Some dangers come with claws and teeth, with screams and clear warning. But some creep slowly, quietly, without ever showing their face. Centralia is that kind of danger. Not loud, not obvious, but patient, and still very much alive. So tell me, would you ever set foot in that haunted town, where the ground breathes smoke and the night seems to listen? Or would you rather keep your distance, safe behind a screen, letting shadows chase your thoughts instead of your footsteps? If dark places like this draw you in, if you crave more stories buried in ash and silence, stick around. There are countless forgotten corners in this world, still waiting to whisper their secrets. And I promise, we'll explore them together.